So in that sense, you could think of World War II as a battle of factories.
Yes.
What does it take to win in the battle of factories in out manufacturing military equipment against the Allies?
It's efficiency, really. So I was kind of, I was thinking, let's take the example of the Sherman tank, for example, the mainstay of the Western Allied forces, and a fair number of them sent to the Soviet Union as well, for that matter.
I think you've said it doesn't get the respect it deserves, maybe?
Doesn't get the respect it deserves. So the Sherman tank, the 75 millimeter main battle gun, which is a sort of medium velocity, fire a shell around kind of 2,000 feet per second, compared to the notorious, infamous German 88 millimeter, which can fire at kind of third fast again, like 3,000 feet per second. But on paper, a Tiger tank coming around the corner and a Sherman tank coming around the corner, it should be no match at all. Tiger tank is 58 tons, looks scary, is scary. It's got a massive gun, got really thick armor.
Mm-hmm.
Sherman tank doesn't have as thick armor, doesn't have a gun that's as big. It should be an absolute walkover. And yet, at about 5:30 p.m. on Monday, the 26th of June, 1944, a Sherman tank came around the corner of a road called a Rue Monsieur, a little village called Fontenay-le-Pesnel in Normandy, came face to face with a Tiger tank and won. How does this happen? Well, I'll tell you how it happened, because the commander of the Sherman tank was experienced, had one up the spout. So what I mean by that is he had an armor-piercing round already in the breech. As soon as he saw the Tiger tank, he just said, fire. That armor-piercing round did not penetrate the Tiger tank. It was never going to. But what it did do was it hit the gun mantlet, which is a bit of reinforced steel that you have just as the barrel is entering the turret. And that caused spalling, which is little shards of little bits of molten metal, which then hit the driver of the Tiger tank in the head. And he was screaming, Gott Himmel or whatever, and couldn't really see. The moment they got hit, the commander of the Tiger tank retreated into the turret of the Tiger. The moment you retreat into into a turret, you can't see. You can see because you've got periscopes, but your visibility is nothing like as good as it is when you've got your head above the turret. Immediately after that, the armor-piercing round from the Sherman tank was repeated by a number of high explosive rounds, which are rounds which kind of detonate, have a little minor charge. Then there's a second charge which creates lots of smoke, and in moments, in the first 30 seconds, 10 rounds from that Sherman tank had hit the Tiger tank before the Tiger tank had unleashed a single round itself, and the crew then surrendered. So you didn't need to destroy the Tiger tank. You just need to stop it operating. If it hasn't got a crew, it's just a chunk of metal that's inoperable. So that's all you need to do. And what that tells you is that experience counts, training counts. The agility of the Sherman tank also counts. It's a smaller shell, therefore it's easier to manhandle, which means you can put more in a breech quicker. There's features on a Sherman tank, like it's the first tank to have a gun stabilizing gyro, which means it's more effective on the move. There's also an override switch on the underside of the turret, so that the commander, if he just sees something out of the corner of his eye, can immediately start moving the turret before the gunner, who is down in the belly of the turret, can react. There's many different factors of it, but the main fact of all is of 1,347 Tigers built, there were 49,000 Shermans. So that means there's 36 Shermans to every single Tiger.
So you actually have an incredible video. You talk about this a lot from different angles, about the top 5 tanks and then the bottom 5 tanks of World War II. I think, was it the Tiger that made both the top 5 and the bottom 5?
The problem with the Tiger tank is it's really huge.
We should say that you keep saying the problem, but one of the pros of the Tiger tank,
it's really huge.
It's, the psychological warfare aspect of it is terrifying.
Yes.
So I don't know what the other pros. I guess the 88 millimeter
high velocity and all the rest of it. It's pretty fearsome, but there are pragmatic problems. The big problems is the Germans are incapable of mass production on a scale that Americans can do. Frankly, even the British can do. They're just not in that league. The reason they're not in that league is because they're in the middle of Europe. They don't have access to the world's oceans. They don't have a merchant fleet. They can't get this stuff. It hasn't gone terribly well in the Soviet Union. They can't process it, and they're being bombed 24 hours a day. And so all their factories are, they're having to split them all up, and that is inherently inefficient because then having to kind of move different parts around, and you're then having the whole process of having to travel from one place to another to get stuff. You haven't got much fuel. So the consequence of that is that what you do is you think, okay, well, we can't mass produce, so let's make really brilliant tanks. But they've lost sight of what a really brilliant is. Really brilliant to their eyes is big, scary, big gun, lots of armor. But actually, what conflict in World War II shows you is that you need more than that. You need ease of maintenance. You need reliability. And the problem with having the bigger the tank, the more complex the maintenance equipment is. You need a bigger hoist, which then means you need a bigger truck, which then uses more fuel. So, for example, the Tiger tank is so big that it doesn't fit on the loading gauge of the European railway system. So they have to have different tracks to roll onto the wagons that will then transport them from A to B, take them from West Germany to Normandy. Then they have to take them off. Then they have to take off the tracks, put on combat tracks, then move them into battle and hope that they don't break down. The problem is when you start the war, it's not very automotive, and you've only got 47 people for every motorized vehicle in Germany compared to 3 in the United States or 8 in France, is that you've got lots of people who don't know how to drive. You also means you haven't got lots of garages and mechanics and gas stations and so on. And so you're then creating an incredibly complex beast, but you want that complex thing to be as simple as you possibly can be. And that's the beauty of the Sherman tank. All those guys in America, they're used to driving stick cars. There's 3 people for every automobile, and that includes, the old and children. So almost, every young man knows how to drive. And when you get into a Sherman tank, it's got a clutch, it's got a throttle, the brakes are the steering mechanism. The clutch is where you would expect the clutch to be. It's got a manual shift. You put your foot on the clutch and you shove it into second gear and off you go, or reverse or whatever. And it literally couldn't be easier. Anyone who could drive a stick car could drive a Sherman tank. Seriously. Not everyone can drive a Tiger tank. It's incredibly complex. Really, really is. And that comes with a whole host of problems. And of course, you don't have the numbers. You've got 1,347 of them. You've got 492 King Tigers, which are even bigger. And at a time where you are really short of fuel and you're really short of absolutely everything. And those shells are huge and they're harder to manhandle. And weird little things that the Germans do, for all their design genius, the loader is always on the right-hand side. Now, in the 1920s and 19-teens and 30s, children were taught to be right-handed. You weren't allowed to be left-handed. So you were right-handed. So you want to be on the left-hand side of the gun, so you can take the shell from your right and swivel it into the breech from your right side. But the loader in a Jagdpanther or Panther or Tiger is always on the right-hand side of the breech, which is ergonomically makes no sense whatsoever. Why do they do this? I've never found an answer to this. But so there's all these little things, and as a soldier coming up against, you're an American GI and you're coming up against a Tiger tank, you don't care about the fact that it's difficult to maintain or the problems involved of trying to get it to the battlefield. All you care about is this monster coming in front of you. It's squeaking and clanking away and it's incredibly scary and it's about to blow you to bits. That's all you care about, and quite understandably so. But those who are protracting the war at a higher level, and historians that come subsequently and look at all this stuff, they do need to worry about all these things. And I remember the same Georg Thomas, the architect of the Hunger Plan. I found this minutes of this meeting, which I think was either on the 4th of December or the 5th of December 1941. So it's just before the Red Army counterattacks outside Moscow in the winter of 1941. And it's a meeting about weaponry. And this is a verbatim quote. He says, "We have to stop making such complete and aesthetic weapons." In other words, we've consciously been building over-engineered and aesthetically pleasing weapons up until this point. And they sort of half manage it, but don't quite.